Before 1948, the geographical area known as Palestine held a unique and complex identity steeped in history and cultural significance. The land was known as Palestine, a British-administered territory. This administration began after the decline and fall of the Ottoman Empire, marking a significant shift in the region's governance and political landscape. It was home to a vibrant Arab majority, Muslims and Christians, who had deep roots in the land, their families having lived there for generations. Living alongside a small indigenous Jewish community in cities like Jerusalem and Hebron, contributing to the diverse social fabric of the region. These communities coexisted, sharing cultural traditions and a common history. Palestinian society thrived in cities and villages, showcasing a rich tapestry of traditions, customs, and social structures. With a rich culture and a strong agricultural economy especially famous for Jaffa oranges, which were a major export and a symbol of Palestinian prosperity. Agriculture was the backbone of the economy, sustaining communities and shaping the landscape. The rise of political Zionism in Europe introduced a movement fueled by the desire to establish a sovereign homeland for the Jewish people. Aiming to transform Palestine into a Jewish state, clashing with Palestinian aspirations for independence and self-determination, creating a growing tension in the region. The British Mandate, starting in the 1920s, was supposed to guide Palestine to independence, fostering a stable and equitable environment for all its inhabitants, but instead facilitated Zionist immigration and land acquisition, altering the demographic balance and intensifying the struggle for land and resources. The 1917 Balfour Declaration promised a Jewish national home in Palestine, a promise that had far-reaching consequences for the region, creating conflicting obligations and instability as the aspirations of both communities collided under the weight of British administration. Palestinians sought sovereignty and self-determination, striving to maintain their cultural identity and political autonomy in the face of increasing external pressures. But their vision was increasingly threatened by Zionist colonization, backed by British power, leading to growing resentment and resistance. The stage was set for a conflict that would define the future of the region, not between equals, but between a native population and a settler colonial movement, each with their own narratives and claims to the land. This is the world from which the modern conflict emerged, a world of competing claims, historical grievances, and unresolved tensions. Zionism, as a political movement, emerged in late 19th century Europe, fueled by a complex interplay of factors. It arose during a period of intense nationalism and growing anti-Semitism across the continent. It sought to establish a Jewish state, primarily as a refuge from escalating anti-Semitism and persecution that plagued Jewish communities throughout Europe. The dream was to create a safe haven where Jews could live free from discrimination and violence. After considering various locations, the movement ultimately focused its aspirations on Palestine, a region with deep historical and religious significance for the Jewish people. However, the Zionist project in its essence was colonial in nature, mirroring the broader European imperial ambitions of the time. It aimed to create an exclusive Jewish state in a land that was already inhabited by a vibrant and established Palestinian Arab population who had lived there for centuries. Following the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, the British Mandate for Palestine was established, setting the stage for increased Jewish immigration and land acquisition. Zionist institutions, backed by international support, systematically acquired land through purchase, often from absentee landlords. These institutions also worked to build parallel structures, including schools, hospitals, and other essential services, laying the foundation for a future state. Crucially, they also established and maintained armed militias, such as the Haganah, to protect Jewish settlements and advance their political goals. In response to increasing Jewish immigration and land acquisition, Palestinian resistance began to grow and intensify. This resistance culminated in the Great Arab Revolt of 1936–39, a widespread uprising against British rule and Zionist expansion, which was brutally crushed by the British forces. The suppression of the revolt left Palestinian society weakened and further marginalized, creating a power imbalance that would have lasting consequences. By the end of World War II, the Zionist movement had emerged as a politically and militarily strong force in the region, well-organized and determined to achieve its objectives. Furthermore, international sympathy for the Zionist cause was significantly heightened by the horrors of the Holocaust, which underscored the urgent need for a Jewish homeland. In 1947, facing increasing pressure and unable to resolve the escalating conflict, Britain decided to hand the issue of Palestine over to the newly formed United Nations. The UN subsequently proposed a plan for partitioning Palestine into separate Arab and Jewish states, a plan that allocated 56% of the land to a Jewish state, despite the demographic realities on the ground. At the time, Jews constituted only about a third of the total population of Palestine, with the majority being Palestinian Arabs. Moreover, Jewish individuals and institutions owned less than 7% of the total land area, highlighting the disparity in land allocation. Unsurprisingly, Palestinians and the wider Arab world vehemently rejected the partition plan, viewing it as deeply unjust and a violation of their rights. The seeds of a lasting and intractable conflict had been sown, setting the stage for decades of violence and displacement. This marked the beginning of a tragic chapter, with the native Palestinian population facing dispossession, displacement, and the loss of their ancestral homeland. For Palestinians, 1947-49 was the Nakba, the catastrophe, marked by systematic ethnic cleansing. Zionist militias under Plan Dalet destroyed villages and expelled Palestinians before Israel's declaration of statehood. Massacres like Deir Yassin spread terror, fueling a mass exodus. On May 14, 1948, Israel was declared. Neighboring Arab armies intervened but were ineffective against Israeli forces. By 1949, Israel controlled 78% of historic Palestine, far beyond the UN plan. Over 750,000 Palestinians became refugees, denied their right of return. The Nakba was not a single event, but an ongoing process of dispossession. The State of Israel rose on the ruins of Palestinian society, and the refugee crisis became permanent. The 1949 armistice lines divided Palestine. Israel held 78%, while the West Bank and Gaza fell under Jordanian and Egyptian control. Palestinians inside Israel became a marginalized minority under military rule until 1966. Hundreds of thousands of refugees languished in camps, denied return by Israel. Over 400 Palestinian villages were erased, replaced by new Israeli towns. The Nakba's erasure was physical and ideological, as Israeli narratives denied Palestinian history. The unresolved refugee crisis and dispossession fueled Arab nationalism and regional instability. The conflict's core issues, land, sovereignty, and return, remained unaddressed, setting the stage for future wars. The division was not peace but a pause in a deepening conflict. In June 1967, tensions that had been simmering for years finally erupted into open conflict as Israel launched the Six-Day War, a swift and decisive military campaign that would reshape the map of the Middle East and the lives of millions. In a matter of days, Israeli forces seized the West Bank, bringing it under military control and altering its demographic and political landscape. Gaza, a small strip of land densely populated with Palestinian refugees, also fell under Israeli control, adding to the growing number of Palestinians living under occupation. East Jerusalem, with its holy sites and historic significance, was captured, further complicating the already fraught relationship between Israelis and Palestinians. The Sinai Peninsula and the Golan Heights were also seized, expanding Israel's territorial control significantly. This was not simply a defensive war fought to protect Israel's borders, but a war of conquest resulting in the acquisition of vast territories and the displacement of hundreds of thousands of people. It fulfilled long-held ambitions within some segments of Israeli society to control all of historic Palestine, a goal that had been pursued for decades. For Palestinians, the Six-Day War meant a new wave of displacement and dispossession. An additional 300,000 more refugees were created, adding to the already existing population of displaced persons from the 1948 war, and the start of a harsh military occupation that would profoundly impact every aspect of Palestinian life. Israel annexed East Jerusalem, a move that was widely condemned by the international community, and imposed military rule, establishing a system of control and governance over the newly occupied territories. This military rule extended over the West Bank and Gaza, impacting every facet of Palestinian society. The nature of the conflict shifted dramatically, moving from a state-to-state war between nations to a situation of direct occupation of Palestinians, with all the attendant consequences for their daily lives and fundamental rights. UN Resolution 242, passed in the aftermath of the war, called for Israeli withdrawal from occupied territories in exchange for peace and recognition. But instead of withdrawing, Israel began building settlements in occupied territory, a move considered illegal under international law. This settlement activity was a clear violation of international law and further complicated the prospects for a peaceful resolution to the conflict. The occupation and settlement project rapidly expanded and became the defining reality for millions of Palestinians, shaping their lives, their futures, and their aspirations. The 1967 war fundamentally transformed the conflict, ushering in a new era of occupation and resistance. It became a struggle over land, national rights, self-determination, and basic survival under a prolonged and increasingly entrenched military occupation. The occupation's legacy of displacement, dispossession, and restricted freedom endures to this day, continuing to shape the lives of Palestinians and Israelis alike. The occupied Palestinian territories, West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza, are governed by international law as occupied lands. Israel's settlement project in these areas is a clear violation of the Fourth Geneva Convention. The West Bank is fragmented by over 200 settlements and settler-only roads, creating an apartheid-like system. East Jerusalem was illegally annexed and is being Judaized through settlements and home demolitions. Gaza, under blockade since 2007, is described as the world's largest open-air prison, suffering repeated military assaults. Despite Israel's 2005 withdrawal from Gaza, it maintains control, making the occupation ongoing. The occupation, direct in the West Bank, indirect in Gaza, remains the central reality for Palestinians. Daily life is defined by restrictions, dispossession, and a struggle for basic rights. Decades after 1967, Palestinian resistance persisted first through the PLO, then mass uprisings known as the Intifadas. The first Intifada, 1987, was a grassroots movement of civil disobedience and protest against occupation. Israel responded with harsh repression, but the uprising shifted global perceptions of the conflict. The Second Intifada, 2000, was more violent, triggered by provocations in Jerusalem and met with overwhelming Israeli force, including the construction of the separation wall. Gaza, under blockade since 2007, has endured repeated devastating assaults, while the West Bank faces relentless settlement expansion and military raids. These cycles of violence are not random, but the result of a system of occupation and apartheid. The struggle is for dignity, rights, and self-determination. The conflict's roots are structural, not simply a matter of clashes. The peace process, most notably the Oslo Accords of the 1990s, promised a two-state solution but failed to address core issues: Jerusalem, refugees, borders, and settlements. Oslo created the Palestinian Authority, but left Israel in control of most of the land. During the peace process, settlements doubled, entrenching occupation. Subsequent initiatives failed, offering Palestinians fragmented cantons, not true statehood. The two-state solution is now widely seen as dead, undermined by relentless settlement expansion. The international community has failed to hold Israel accountable. Real peace requires justice, equality, and confronting the reality of a single state where millions are denied rights. The path forward must move beyond failed paradigms. Understanding this history is essential to grasping today's reality. The Nakba is ongoing. Millions of refugees remain in exile, denied return. Dispossession continues through home demolitions, land confiscation, and settler violence. The occupation is the longest in modern history, a permanent system of control. Daily life for Palestinians means checkpoints, raids, and a dual legal system privileging settlers. Gaza's siege has created a humanitarian crisis. This is not a conflict between equals, but a struggle between a powerful state and a stateless, occupied people. Language matters. Terms like clashes obscure the reality of occupation and resistance. Only by acknowledging historical injustice and ending occupation can a just future be built. Truth, accountability, and rights for Palestinians are the foundation for real peace.